For the first episode of Delisted, I had but one game in mind, and that was Sonic the Hedgehog. If you ever touched a SEGA console, you have played this game in some shape or form. It has been packed into collections as far back as the Genesis. Hell, my copy of the game was in the SEGA 6-pack. While this one is synonymous with SEGA, as a whole does this original title from 1991 actually hold up today? Or would it be better off forgotten to the sands of time? I could list all the ways this game made SEGA a competitor to Nintendo, or I could tell you facts about it you probably already know. Did you know that Sonic was made by a committee and was a blend of elements from Felix the Cat and Mickey Mouse?
See, nobody cares.
Does any of that matter to playing the game in this current year? Not really. I mean, obviously, it means Sonic the Hedgehog has merit, and a certain level of historical significance to SEGA, and to gaming as a whole. But is it fun to play? If we were only talking about Green Hill Zone, then hell yeah, brother. Sonic the Hedgehog 1 is as fun as ever. In all seriousness, Green Hill Zone is the Sonic the Hedgehog zone. It's been in more Sonic games than you think it has, and for good reason. It's an icon. Off the top of my head, it was unlockable reward in Sonic Adventure 2. It's in Generations and Mania. It's also Sonic's stage in Smash Bros. I'm sure y'all can give me many more examples in the comments. There is no denying that this stage and its music combined for a top-tier video game level. The imagery from the palm trees to the checkered ground to the waterfall could be looked at from most of the world's population, and they'd know it was Sonic related. And most importantly, the stage is fun. As for Marble Zone, it does slow the game to a crawl, and while speed is very much absent, I'd argue the zone is still fun. Sure, it's tonally a complete departure from Green Hill. However, pushing blocks and jumping over lava is still fun and looks visually appealing. There are a few too many enemies off-screen that you will jump into, and a few of the spike traps that fall from the ceiling will require you to memorize the layout, but it never feels overly obnoxious. When I think obnoxious, I think of Springyard Zone. I will not sugarcoat or apologize for the loathing and displeasure I have for Springyard Zone. It's ugly, it's cheap, and it seems to go on for what feels like forever. Thank the heavens, Sonic got rid of 3-act zones. Well, for the most part after this game. Springyard ended most of my runs of Sonic the Hedgehog as a kid, and I think because of that, I held on to this belief that 2/3 of this game was fun, so it must be a fun game still. However, because I am an adult now, and I live in the future, I can firmly say this game is not fun overall. The special stages are nauseating, and again, Springyard is just overly cheap. Things run into you from the back, there's spikes everywhere. I don't know. It's fairly miserable to play. And that's not even the worst one we go to. Because that crown belongs to Labyrinth Zone. It is in the running for the worst water level ever made. I don't even know how to describe how terrible this zone is. Sonic's whole thing is speed, and you're underwater, slowly walking on the bottom of a lake, wishing you were already dead, but luckily for you, you'll die over and over and over and over again. In fact, there's a link above to watching me die in this stage over and over again. Because it literally ended the last run of this game I played. Labyrinth Zone is miserable. And I hate it. And I always will hate it. Thankfully, the game does pick up again in Starlight Zone. With more loops to speed through and a better design philosophy, its verticality feels unique, and using these seesaws to ascend keeps you on your toes. Stage overall feels akin to a Sonic CD stage, which is a breath of fresh air from the slog that is Labyrinth Zone. Overall, I enjoyed Starlight Zone. I think it had a good soundtrack again, and it was pushing you forward, which is what I like in my Sonic games. I like to just keep on moving. It's kind of his whole thing. I honestly have no idea how to feel about Scrap Brain Zone. Yeah, it's like a lot of bottomless pits, which are annoying, and some enemies are in precarious spots. I don't know, it just never feels like overwhelming, just a bit challenging. However, Sonic the Hedgehog then does one of the greatest deceptions in video game history, and that's replacing Scrap Brains Act 3 with a Labyrinth Zone Act 4. And there isn't supposed to be any Act 4s. I'm not sure what SEGA had against kids in the 90s, but this was, and will always be, a dick move. For the final confrontation with Dr. Robotnik, or Eggman for you youngins. It's a lot of just waiting around for his Robotnik to be in the right section of the stage so you can bash him. You're literally gonna stand in the same space, dodge the laser beams, and just wait for him to move through these pistons until he's on the right one. So you can hit him. And once you hit him 8 times, that's the end. Anyway, today on Delisted, it's episode 5, Sonic Spinball. Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball, also known as Sonic Spinball, is a 1993 pinball video game developed by SEGA Technical Institute and published by SEGA for the Sega Genesis. It is a spin-off of the Sonic the Hedgehog series. Players control Sonic the Hedgehog, who must stop Dr. Robotnik from enslaving the population in a giant pinball-like mechanism. The game is set in a series of pinball machine-like environments, with Sonic acting as the pinball. It was developed by the American staff of Sega Technical Institute, as the Japanese staff was occupied developing Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic & Knuckles. When Sega management realized that Sonic 3 would not be completed in time for the 1993 holiday shopping season, they commissioned another Sonic game. After a hasty 9-month development, Sonic Spinball was released for the Sega Genesis in November of 1993, with ports for the Game Gear and Master System releasing in 1994. So despite the small time frame STI had to make this game, it does feel like a complete package. While 4 tables or levels doesn't sound like much, it was for the time. I mean, this was a whole year before Windows would get 3D Space Cadet pinball, and that's only 1 table. It's pretty interesting too that they made this because Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was delayed for a year. Not only was it delayed, it famously was only half a game when it finally did release. That's why and how we got the lock-on cartridge of Sonic and Knuckles. So I'm not really sure what Sega actually gained by rushing out a Sonic pinball game. Obviously it wasn't good enough to buy enough time for them to feel as though they could wait even longer to get Sonic the Hedgehog 3 out in one piece. Sonic Spinball sold 1 million copies, making it the 16th best-selling game on the system. 70% of its sales came from North America. While it was quite a bit behind Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which sold 7.5 million on the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, it's not exactly like it was a failure by any means. One could argue that it paid off for Sega because without it, the combined sales of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic and Knuckles being only around half of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 would have been a harder pill to swallow. And if you were curious, Sonic the Hedgehog 1 is the best-selling game on the Sega Genesis Mega Drive, estimated at 15 million copies. It was a pack-in title for a long time in North America, much like the Super Mario Bros. Were for the Nintendo Entertainment System back in 1984. Makes me wonder if or how they take into account compilations. I owned Sonic the Hedgehog 1 on the Sega 6-pack, and Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was a pack-in title for me with the Genesis Model 2. Anyhow, with the history lesson out of the way, just what the heck is Sonic Spinball? And more importantly, is Sonic's first spin-off as fun as Casino Night Zone in Sonic the Hedgehog 2? Let's start with the game's sound, because that's going to be the first thing you notice when you boot it up. The intro cutscene is aggressive and scratchy. The title screen is a jam though, probably the only song I like in this entire game, honestly. The rest has that gems quality I never really liked. It's such a shame they moved on from the man who did the first 2 Sonic game soundtracks. I mean, there are definitely other songs throughout the Genesis and CD Sonic games that are still enjoyable, but I don't think any of them touch the greatness of Green Hill Zone, Robotnik's boss theme, or most of the zones in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Maybe I'd feel differently if Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic & Knuckles were in more collections, but their game's music licenses are the reason for the game's absences in the vast majority of them, including this one that we're covering today. Even the most recent Sonic Origins has a few zone themes swapped out. It's a real shame. Long story short, if I was going to do a tier list of Sonic music, Spinball would be towards the bottom. Speaking of story, this game has one. On Earth, Dr. Eggman builds the Vejo Fortress on Mount Mobius, a stronghold powered by volcanoes and Chaos Emerald energy. This fortress is protected by a pinball defense system that houses the 16, way more than 7, Chaos Emeralds. Sonic and Tails approach the Vejo Fortress on a plane, and Sonic jumps off and ends up in the Toxic Caves, the lowest point of Eggman's base. Sonic eventually collects all but 5 Chaos Emeralds and destroys the Vejo machine. That makes the Badniks. The Vejo Fortress starts to crumble as a result. Eggman tries to escape on his rocket ship, only for Sonic to board it, collect the final emeralds, and defeat the Doctor aboard, destroying his ship. As both adversaries fall from the sky, the Hedgehog is saved by Tails with his airplane, while Eggman falls into his crumbling base and sinks into the sea. Long story short, Dr. Robotnik is being a robot dick. Now moving on to the sprite work and the graphics of Sonic Spinball. It might be the worst aspect of the game. I don't necessarily mind how dark and muddy most of the tables are, but I do find with the camera being so zoomed in to the action of Sonic, makes the game more difficult than it should be. On an actual pinball table, you can see everything, so with the camera being like a sixth of where I'm going to place my ball, it makes aiming really, for anything, a guessing game. So you can move Sonic around while he's in ball form, but not enough to fix the inability to hit him in the right direction. When he isn't a ball, it doesn't really feel like Sonic either, but that could be like a deliberate thing. Overall, the entire game feels like he's on ice. Just super slick, but not in the cool way we said it back in '94. The overall objective in Sonic Spinball is to collect the Chaos Emeralds that power Dr. Robotnik's volcano lair, so it destabilizes, and it will erupt, destroying the entire pinball table in the process. In each area, the game tells you how to unlock the next Chaos Emerald, whether it's hitting a barrier 3 times, breaking barrels, or draining sludge. After you collect all the emeralds in the stage, you fight a boss. All the bosses are Nightmare Robotniks, inspired by Nightmare on Elm Street's villain, Freddy. The game is extremely difficult to progress through. I think the camera being so pulled in is the biggest detriment to the gameplay. That being said, however, this was also an era of a real lack of continues in video games. A lot of it has to do with video game companies making sure you couldn't rent a game from Blockbuster and beat it in a weekend. The other problem, they were so used to creating games for the arcade where the incentive of a difficult game was to add more quarters. The original pay-to-win games were arcade cabinets. However, when you charge families $42 back in '94 for a single-player video game, I, the owner of said video game, should be able to add credits. Or at the very least, give me a frickin' continue, SEGA. Having to collect all 16 Chaos Emeralds and beat Sonic Spinball with only 3 lives is not only hard, but it's not fun. Also, this was the game I discovered the input lag in this collection was significant. I'd like to retroactively blame it for all the other, less than stellar gameplay you've seen from me in the previous episodes of Delisted. In all seriousness, it has been documented in many forums across the internet. I looked it up because about the 5th time I hit a loop in the first stage, I thought I was going insane. So overall, this game in this collection is not a great representation of the original cart. I do think that Sonic Spinball has an interesting history of how it was basically just a stopgap for SEGA to keep Sonic in the mind of the masses before they could finish Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Imagine if companies still did that today. Team Cherry could have released Hollow Knight Pinball during the 6 years it took to finish Silksong. While it is a cool relic of the landscape of video games in the 90s, I don't think it's all that fun. Maybe if you have like half an hour or so to kill, it's alright. But overall, it's the second weakest outing for Sonic on the Sega Genesis. So, fandom's a funny thing. You know, the first time I hated a movie was the Super Mario Bros. Movie. The second time I hated a movie was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 movie. And, you know, we could just fall in and out of fandom. You know? Like, some people came back to Star Wars after the prequels, and they were like, oh, these sequels might be good. And other people didn't like the sequels, but they like the prequels. So fandom is just a thing that one day you like something, the next day you don't. And it could even make you hate something. And for me, Sonic 3D Blast was the third strike against Sonic the Hedgehog. The first, admittedly, was a Tiger Electronic toy I had, which were garbage even at the time. The second was Sonic Spinball, which we've covered here. And then came along Sonic 3D Blast, which was just not good. It was not fun. I've talked about it before on the channel, and I will go into depth for my loathing of this game during this video. But first, what is Sonic 3D Blast? Sonic 3D Blast, known in regions outside of North America as Sonic 3D Flicky's Island, or as I would call it, Sonic 3D Fucky's Island, is a 1996 platform game in the Sonic the Hedgehog series for the Sega Genesis and Sega Saturn. As Sonic the Hedgehog, the player embarks on a journey to save the Flickies, birds that are enslaved by Dr. Robotnik. The player must guide Sonic through a series of themed levels to collect Flickies and defeat Robotnik. The concept for Sonic 3D Blast originated during the development of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 in 1994. Most of the programming was outsourced to the British studio Traveller's Tale, as the Japanese Sonic team staff was preoccupied with Nights into Dreams in 1996. Development lasted 8 months, and the team drew inspiration from Donkey Kong Country, which if you're looking at this footage, pretty obvious, and Sonic Labyrinth, which was a game on the Game Gear. That was terrible. Sonic 3D Blast was developed alongside the Saturn game Sonic Extreme. When Extreme was cancelled, Sega commissioned a port of 3D Blast featuring improved graphics for the Saturn. But that's not the one we're talking about today. Both versions were published by Sega in November 1996 with a Windows port released the following year. Sonic 3D Blast was the final Sonic game for the Genesis and has been re-released through Sonic compilations and digital distribution platforms, much like this one. The game was commercially successful and received positive reviews for the Genesis version. Critics welcomed the new gameplay style as well as the graphics and the music. Subsequent releases were met with more mixed reviews, with the Saturn version being seen as too similar to the Genesis version. Retrospective reviews, much like this one, criticized the isometric gameplay controls and pace, although reception to the visuals and soundtrack remained positive. An unofficial director's cut version featured adjusted gameplay elements and improved controls, was released by the Genesis version's lead programmer, John Burton, in 2017. He actually has his own YouTube channel. So, Sonic 3D Blast is split into several zones. Every zone has 3 acts, 2 standard levels, where the player must collect flickies by defeating robots in order to proceed, and a boss fight in Zone 3, or Act 3, of every level, against Robotnik. In normal levels, once the player collects all 5 flickies from each section of an act, Sonic is either further advanced into the act or taken to the next act. If Sonic and the following flickies are hit by an obstacle or enemy, the flickies and the rings Sonic collect will scatter. Each individual flickie's color determines its behavior. Blue, pink, and orange flickies will make an effort to find Sonic, while green and red flickies wander off at random. The latter even jump about, making them harder to recollect. Sonic starts the game with 4 lives. If he is hit with no flickies or rings in his possession, he will lose a life. Losing all lives results in a game over. Lives can be replenished by collecting a 1-up, and continues are obtained by collecting 10 Sonic-shaped medals, which are scattered throughout each zone. As with the previous games, Sonic 3D Blast includes special stages, in which the player collects Chaos Emeralds. Attaining all 7 Chaos Emeralds allows the player to play the final boss battle, and discover the true ending of the game. To access these stages, the player must find one of Sonic's friends, either Tails or Knuckles the Cheetah, hidden within a level, and stand next to them with at least 50 rings collected. Doing so allows the player to exchange the rings in order for the chance to play the game's special stages. During the special stages, the camera shifts behind Sonic, much like in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and he runs down a present path and must collect rings while avoiding obstacles that, when ran into, will make him lose rings. The special stages are like super easy. Again, it's a lot like Sonic the Hedgehog 2, except way easier. It's pretty hard not to get to the end and get the Chaos Emerald, if you're trying to play this game to the end anyways, which I would recommend not doing. Not really worth your time. I was astonished to learn that the reception on release was anything other than negative, because even when I was 10 years old, I found this game to be just awful to control. Just so, like, the momentum that Sonic has during the gameplay does not really match with the frame rate or whatever's going on with the ground level, the isometric view in the game itself. You are just going too fast for the camera, and it just never feels good. Not once. Not never. So yeah, that was a surprise. The music, however, is amazing. I feel like people didn't tell them that they were working on such a side content Sonic game, because it sounds just as good as Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So, kudos to that, and here are some snippets of that music for your listening pleasure. So I've made it no secret on this channel, or in this video at the very least, that I did not enjoy Sonic 3D Blast. I thought it to be painfully boring and kind of nauseating to play, and not really a Sonic game. Like, Sonic is known for speed. I think SEGA has this problem throughout the history of the Sonic franchise, where they like to slow Sonic down to the point where it's just not fun. Like, they've been doing it since the very first Sonic game. Green Hill Zone, everyone remembers being fast and fun and fluid, and then 2 seconds later you're crawling along in lava. It's like, I just don't get it. But, you know, this is the game that killed my love of Sonic the Hedgehog. What was yours? Do you still love Sonic the Hedgehog today? I think we can all agree that there was several good games on the Sega Genesis, and Sonic Mania was a great return to form, and they could have just kept making that game over and over again. Why they didn't, I don't know. Do you like the 3D Sonic games? Is this a 3D Sonic game, in your opinion? It's not in mine. I wouldn't compare this to Sonic Adventure, or Sonic Adventure 2. Maybe Sonic 06, because it's about as fun. But what do you think? Where do you stand on the Sonic the Hedgehog of it all? Otherwise known as the best game on the Sega Genesis. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is a 1992 platform game developed by Sega Technical Institute, or STI for short, for the Sega Genesis. Players control Sonic as he attempts to stop Dr. Robotnik from stealing the Chaos Emeralds to power his space station, the Death Egg. Like the first Sonic the Hedgehog from 1991, players traverse side-scrolling levels at high speeds while collecting rings, defeating enemies, and fighting bosses. Sonic 2 introduces Sonic's sidekick, Miles, Tails' Prower, and features faster gameplay, larger levels, a multiplayer mode, special stages that featured a pre-rendered 3D graphic. After the first Sonic the Hedgehog greatly increased the popularity of the Genesis in North America, Sega directed STI's founder, Mark Cerny, to start Sonic 2 in November of 1991. Members of Sonic Team, including the programmer Yugi Naka and designers Hirokazu Yashura, moved from Japan to California to join the project. Sonic 2 was intended to be faster and more ambitious than the first game. The development suffered setbacks, including cultural differences between the Japanese and American staff, and numerous levels were cut due to time constraints and quality concerns. As with the first game, Masato Nakamura, a member of the J-pop band Dreams Come True, composed the soundtrack. Sonic 2 was widely anticipated, and Sega backed it with an aggressive $10 million marketing campaign. It was released in November 1992 to acclaim and receive numerous year-end accolades, including 2 Golden Joystick Awards. Critics considered Sonic 2 an improvement over the first game and praised the visuals, level design, gameplay, and music, but criticized the low difficult level and similarities to its predecessor. Sonic 2 grossed over $450 million and sold 6 million copies by 2006, making it the second best-selling Genesis game behind the original Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic 2 solidified Sonic as a major franchise and helped keep Sega competitive during the console wars of the 16-bit era in early 1990s. It continues to receive acclaim and is considered one of the greatest video games. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic & Knuckles followed in 1994. Sonic 2 has been re-released on various platforms via compilations and emulation. A remake was released for Android and ISO in 2013 and ported to consoles in the compilation Sonic Origins in 2022. A number of Sonic 2 prototypes have leaked since the release. The first, discovered in 1990, played a significant role in the development of the game data mining community. I'm going to talk about the game's level first. So let's talk about the levels for Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And we'll start with Emerald Hill Zone, which I feel like the developers chose to play safe with the very first level of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Emerald Hill Zone, sharing much of its visual identity to Green Hill Zone of Sonic the Hedgehog 1, which was not only the most iconic level in that game, but I would argue it is the most iconic level in the entire franchise. Emerald Hill Zone, borrowing much of its palm trees and green grass and waterfalls, does not really surprise me, but it does make it more of a, I guess, callback to the first zone in Sonic the Hedgehog 1. Still has a great song, and is still very fun to play to this day. And for Chemical Plant Zone, this is Sonic 2's most iconic level, and has been reused in both Sonic Generations and Sonic Mania. The Cold and Sterile level is really quite a departure from Emerald Hill. When I was a kid, I must have drowned during Act 2's block climb dozens of times. That music, while you're running out of air, manages to still be stressful in every playthrough to this day. I also feel like I clipped through the boss after the killing blow into the chemical to lose a life far too often. And while the special stage is very cool looking, especially back in the day, I find it to be relatively pointless to get Supersonic after, like, it's all said and done. Because you can't even have rings for the last boss, so what are we doing? You do get a different end card, though, so I guess it's worth it in that regard. But it's also a way to end up getting more lives and continues and stuff, so it still serves a purpose. But you also can't have Super Tails, which is a real bummer. Aquatic Ruin Zone is one of my favorite zones in the entire game, and has one of the best songs in the entire game. It helps that although it is a water zone, there is an upper path, so you can basically ignore all of the water sections. And I also like the boss at the end. It's very creative and different than pretty much any of the other bosses in any of the other games. Casino Night Zone might be the reason I hate gambling. I can't count how many times I'd accidentally bump my way into the slots, only get 3 Robotniks in a row and lose all my rings. Top tier song, even if I find it hard to properly hear it with all the bumper noises. Definitely can see how this level inspired Sonic Spinball. Hilltop Zone feels like a continuation of Emerald Hill Zone, but you're higher up. It has borrowed mechanics from Sonic 1 with the seesaws and lava returning. Overall a fun area, but fairly easy to skip a lot of it by going through the upper path. Also is a very funky song, which I like quite a bit. Mystic Cave Zone has the best Halloween song in the game, but this zone also slows Sonic down quite a bit. I never really found it annoying though. Feels a little like you're an explorer rather than waiting around. Has a famous bridge that if you miss the control to bring it down, you'll just be stuck on some spikes until you lose all your rings and your life. This boss always felt a little too random where the sharp rocks will fall, but I'm sure there's just some pattern I'm not seeing. Probably my favorite zone in the game, even if it's not all speed and loops. Oil Ocean Zone has a very unique song throughout its level. It's very like Arabian sounding. Overall, a very cool looking and sounding zone, and it's possibly the last one that's fun to play. Because next we have Metropolis Zone, which is 3 acts, and every single level is way too big, with way too many spikes. And 2 of the most annoying regular enemies in the entire game. Actually 3. There's the Star Me looking fellas, or Star You looking fellas, the Scyther looking guys, and then the crabs, which just punch you in the face. And lava makes a nice return here. And there's also a weird bouncing puzzle that if you go down too far, you have to like redo like 3 times in the first act for some reason. And you have the nuts and bolts that take too long. You're getting shot by the Staryus. Just, I don't even know if the song is bad, or it's just bad because I associate it with, like, the longest and boringest zone in the entire game. But yeah, not a fan of Metropolis Zone. That's a Sonic 1 zone in a Sonic 2 game. No thank you. And now Sky Chase Zone, which is just a one-act zone, is every speedrunner's worst nightmare. It is an auto-scroller, and this one also seems to take forever. But it is nice to have Tails fly around, or Sonic if you're playing as Tails. So that's cool. But overall, it's just kind of waiting around, try not to get shot. You're on an airplane. It's whatever. It's a whatever zone. And it's not even short. And Wing Fortress Zone, so I probably jumped the gun a little bit, said Oil Ocean Zone was the last fun one. Wing Fortress Zone is fine. It's whatever. It's got a very victorious sounding song. And overall it's fun to like navigate the plane, working your way up. The last boss in the zone is kind of bullshit. It's very much like Robotnik just watching you get stabbed over and over again while he giggles like the dog from Duck Hunt. But yeah, it's a fun level. I was too harsh earlier saying Oil Ocean was the last one. This is probably the last fun zone. Because the last zone is not even a zone. because finally we have Death Egg Zone, which is just 2 boss fights, and you get no rings. Which again is why I bring up, don't even bother getting Supersonic, because the one time you would need it, for 2 bosses in a row, you can't even have 50 rings. You get 0 rings. Literally no point. That said, it's kind of epic to fight yourself and then a giant Robotnik robot in the end. And they're like, very much, alright, figure it out. Because you're stuck here until you beat them both in a row with no rings. But I have like a million times, so it's fine. And then you've beaten the game. And what a game it is. It's the best Sonic game to me, even counting Sonic Mania. Sonic Mania is probably second. But yeah, it's definitely the best game on the Sega Genesis, and it's the best game in this Sega Genesis collection that you can no longer buy digitally. And you also can't buy the iOS and Android versions of this game digitally anymore either. Why Sega does this? I don't know. But we covered it here through 10 episodes of Delisted. I don't know if I'm going to be covering this game anymore, or the gaming landscape as a whole over delisting games anymore, because there's so many. There's so many. In fact, I'm going to have an end screen where it's just scrolling all the games you can't buy digitally anymore. And yeah, it's a bummer, but that's why they're doing that Stop Killing Games initiative over in the UK, and you wish them the best, because games should be preserved like anything else. Music, movies, books. It's art at the end of the day. And why are we getting rid of art? You know, it's crazy. So yeah, this has been Delisted. I've been your host, Bunny Smacker. Thanks for joining me on this journey. I still plan on reviewing games and talking about old games on this channel, but yeah, I think we're done. We're done with this collection. We got 10 out of 60. There's 60 games in it. We did 10 of them. Ended on a high note. Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Alright, well, thanks for listening to me, and see you in the next one. Whatever that may be. Same bunny time, same bunny channel. Alright, see ya.